How's it going, guys? In today's video, I'll be briefly talking about Zeus and whether or not he's worth getting. The short answer is yes, he's worth getting. I'd say he's very solid overall in every category, however, I rarely see him being the best in a category, besides for a very few specific scenarios like an all-mage team or against a light element raid boss. Because Swordmaster's story is a game of many different kinds of levels and bosses, you would want the best for that scenario. There's not one team that can handle everything, and because I see Zeus not being the best in many situations, I cannot rank him any higher than A tier. Now I'll quickly give a rundown on his skills. His first skill, Glare of Judgment, is an active skill that does a great deal of burst damage that also inflicts shock to the enemy, which essentially increases the damage the enemy takes over time. His second skill, Lightning Spear, reduces his damage done to water enemies, but increases his attack and crit damage based on his skill level and transcendence. It also increases his crit rate for every mage in the party, and increases the team's damage dealt to light enemies. The second effect of the skill reduces the crit resist of the enemy over time, which could aid in dealing more damage to the enemy. Zeus's third skill, God's Protection, increases his damage to light enemies and reduces his damage taken by light enemies, but at the cost of increasing the damage he receives from water enemies, making him not recommended to use against water bosses. The second part of the skill generates a shield based on his attack and the number of mages in the party, only applied to him each time he uses his active skill. To reiterate that again, each time he performs an active skill, a shield is applied to only himself, and this amount of shield increases based on his attack and the number of mages on the team. Zeus's fourth skill, Fragrance of Immortality, decreases the damage he receives by 10% in addition to increasing his health and boss damage depending on his skill level and transcendence level. The second part of the skill increases each team member's crit resist by 15% in proportion to Zeus's transcendence level and the number of mages in the party. This may prove useful for new to mid-game players who need slightly more crit resist to survive. Keep in mind that the current moist meta that has characters like Ice and Aqua still provide much more crit resist needed for late game guild territory in Dark Lord's Tower. And lastly, Zeus's fifth skill, Heaven's Authority, increases his attack and defense immensely, in addition to his crit rate and normal monster damage. The second part of his skill is essentially a passive haste and ensures his attacks hit, but does not guarantee crit. This skill makes him more viable for game modes like Infinite Slasher and PvP. In summary, what are the key takeaways for his character and toolset? Zeus is a tanky mage and works the best in all mage teams, which isn't used as commonly as I would expect. In non-all mage teams, he's still very useful and can hold his own. Some additional perks include the following: 50% crit resist reduction over time, 10% extra damage done due to electric shock, extra damage towards light enemies, great for most bosses, especially light bosses in Raid, Abyss, and Demon Tower, and 15% crit resist buff to each character for every mage on the team, which is great to have for mage comps in guild territory or Dark Lord's Tower. In order for him to be useful in Raid, I would suggest pairing him with an all mage team with 60% cooldown reduction. Additionally, his passive haste and screen-wide basic attacks make him good for PvP and slasher mode. And understand that electric shock functions similar to burn, except it makes it so that the enemy takes more damage instead of a burn, which reduces their healing. Here is a visual representation of how me and many others rank his viability in various game modes. You can see he's very strong in most areas, so I have no issues recommending him for most players. However, also understand that I don't believe him to be the best in many situations, and as Swordmaster's story is a game of many different situations and challenges, there's not a single team that can clear everything, so you want to make sure that you do pick the best possible team for a particular battle. Because I seldomly see Zeus as being the best in many situations, I can't rank him any higher than A tier. He's great, but truthfully speaking, I just don't find myself using him all that much. If you like him, then go ahead and get him. If you're just starting out, I would recommend looking for other top tier characters to start out with, such as Mia, Efreet, or even Lugrins and Ymir. Lastly, I'll just talk about how you should gear him. If he's the only character getting hit, then I would give him your tankiest armor set, such as the Guardian set. Alternatives to that would be a combination of sets that would give him damage reduction, such as the Demon, Executioner, Achilles, Slasher, or ancient sets to name a few. If you're fighting a boss that hits your entire team, I would typically not give him your tankiest set since he can already generate his own shields, so your tankiest set would be better used on someone squishier. In this case, you can give him a combination of sets that give him damage reduction and attack, such as 3 Slasher and 2 Achilles, or 3 Demon and 2 Achilles, etc. As for his weapon, I would give him any weapon that is refined to give him enough cooldown reduction to have 60%. Note, this is when paired with a ring that also has cooldown reduction. Ideally, his best weapon would be the Holy Sword Estia if it had lots of attack and cooldown reduction. Those are my opinions, so if you guys had any other questions about Zeus, feel free to ask them in the comments below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.